Meyer from Mayor, Hebrew name, like that. Okay. We're on. We're ready to roll. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Okay, we are on Lamed Ches and Aleph. You know, Lamed Ches means lach, moist. It should always be fresh, right? Torah should be like new, fresh, not old, not dry, not stale. Okay, we are on Lamed Ches and Aleph. Continuing. Good morning, Avram. Good morning, Shmuel.
Good morning.
You sent to the group, right, Morris? I want to thank Morris for setting up the computer. We don't take anything for granted. Okay, we are about 6-7 lines from the top. Morning, Akiva. 6 lines from the top. Va'oma ma baravashi. Everyone have it? The first word of the line is Rav Ashi. Page 38A. Lamed Ches Lamed Aleph. Tell me if you got it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, 8 lines to the top. Ma baravashi. Hai dufsha de tamri. Honey that comes out from dates. We know there's something called bee honey, there's something called date honey. The question here is, what's the law with date honey? You're gonna make you want to, if you want to eat honey, you want to eat honey from a date. Squeeze out the date, you squeeze out the honey, and now I want to know what bracha do you make on the honey? So the Gemara says, "Mevorchin alea shehakol niyeh b'dvaro." The Gemara says the honey that comes out of the date is a shehakol. That's the bracha. Why? The Gemara says, "My timer." What's the reason why the bracha on the honey is shehakol? We look at it like zeya ba'alma. We look at it like the moistness, like the sweat that comes out of the fruit. And since we don't look at it as the fruit itself is the whole product, the shell of the date, and so on and so forth. That's the fruit, and therefore you say a shahakol, which is similar to apple juice and all other juices, that we look at them as the sweat, the moistness of the fruit. We don't look at the apple as the fruit itself, and therefore we say a shahakol on apple juice, on orange juice. We look at the fruit as the orange. Now, there is a machlokas regarding this this honey. There are those that say that only when the honey is not, it's mixed, and it gets mixed with water and that type of stuff. But if the honey is actually in its original state and you didn't dilute the honey, so there are those that say that you actually would say a borei pri 8 on the honey. And the Rabbeinu Yonah disagrees, and he says whether the honey was diluted with water or whether the honey was not diluted with water, the proper bracha would be a shehakol. The only exception to the rule is olive oil, which we said is a 8, and wine oil, the grape juice, the juice that comes from a grape is a borei pri gefen. All other liquids are a shehakol. That's what the Rabbeinu Yonah says. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says we don't look at this as the fruit itself. We look at this as the moistness of the fruit. It's not the fruit, and therefore it's the shehakol. Now, the Gemara continues. 1 second. Might now, ki haitan keman. Who is this law like? What is the source of this law? So the Gemara says, ki haitana. We find it by some other halacha. What's the other halacha? Now, we learned in the Mishnah. There's a Mishnah that deals with truma. Dvash tumorim. The honey from dates. The yayin tapuchim. and let's say apple cider, grape, the juice that comes from the apples. For homemade siphonios, and the vinegar that's made from the grapes that stay on the vine very late. These are grapes that don't ripen. So these are so if you have the juice from these grapes, or the apple cider, or the or this honey, usha me peros, and also other juices from any other fruit. And what happened if someone goes ahead and these were truma, right? You had so truma. These were truma. That means the dates were truma given to the kohen, and then from the dates that were truma came out this honey. You made honey from these dates, the truma dates, or you had grapes that were truma, and you made this vinegar from these grapes, or you had the apples that were truma, and you made apple juice from it. And then what happened? A non-Kohen went ahead and he ate this honey. A non-Kohen had this apple cider. So now the law is, what's the general law? The law is if you eat the truma, if a non-Kohen eats truma b'shogeg, unintentionally, you pay back what you ate. You should not have eaten it. It belonged to the Kohen. Plus, there's a fine. What's the fine? You have to add a fifth. You have to pay him also a fifth as well. But the question is, that's if you ate the actual fruit of truma. But if you go ahead and you ate something which is not the actual fruit of the truma, you went ahead and you ate so to speak, the sweat of the truma, meaning the sweat, the moisture that comes out of the truma. We don't look at that as the fruit, meaning to say the apple juice that came out of the apple is not really the apple. It's just some sort of, we look at it in a different light. We look at it like something that it's not the fruit itself. It's just some sort of product that came out of the fruit, but it's not the fruit itself. It's a derivative of the fruit, and therefore you will not be subject. So the Gemara says that there's a machlokes in the Mishnah and Trumos. And good morning, Mike. And the Gemara says Rabbi Eliezer mechayev keren v'chomesh. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to pay back if you ate the honey of truma. You ate this this apple cider that came out from the apple. So he said you have to pay. He looks at the juice as the fruit, and therefore the same way if you eat the fruit of truma, you have to pay a fine. So to the derivative of Mr. Haber said, but Rabbi Yeshua Poteh, Rabbi Yeshua does not look at the juice that comes out from the dates, or not only that comes out of the dates, or the apple cider, the apple juice that comes out from the apple. He doesn't look at it like the fruit itself. Since it's not the fruit itself, so you don't pay the extra fine, the extra fifth. And that's what this Tana is in agreement. Now, and therefore this Tana who says that you say is shehakol on honey, because he looks at the honey not like the fruit itself. Now, you should know when the Torah refers to dates, how does the Torah refer to? The Torah refers to the Shivas Haminim. The Torah talks about Eretz Israel is a land of chitos Torah. It produces wheat and barley, and it also talks about the grapes, the pomegranates, the olives, right? The figs, and then one of the seven, the big seven, I think the big seven is what is Zeish Shemen Udvash. One of the things that the Torah refers to as the seven minim of Eretz Israel is Dvash. So, Rabbi, what do you mean Dvash is not the fruit? We're saying in our Gemara that the honey is not the fruit is the date. When the Torah refers to the seven fruits of Israel, it actually refers to it as honey, right? So how can we say it's not the honey, it's not the fruit? Well, it's like some sort of derivative. It's the moistness that comes out of the fruit. We don't look at it like the fruit itself. It's like the sweat of the fruit. If the Torah itself refers to it as honey as one of the 7 species. What did you say? One principal item is honey. So how can you say it's not the fruit? So the way they understand is that the Torah refers to it as honey. It's the way it's referring to the date. The date that make honey, but it's not referring to the honey itself. Meaning to say the fact that Torah calls it honey is not referring to it's referring to the date that makes honey. Sometimes you refer to an item by what it produces or a derivative of the item, but not by the item itself. So therefore, that's how some understand when the Torah says dvash. When the Torah talks about dvash, it's referring to the date. The date that makes honey. That's how we have to translate that pasuk. Okay. Now, Amar lehu hu mirabanan. Now we're going to get into the other type of other questions. What we make on certain types of food? Amar lehu hu mirabanan l'Rava. So one of the rabbis asked Rava the following question: Trima mahu. What's the law if you have something, a fruit that you crushed? You crushed the fruit, but it was not completely crushed. That it's like it's not like baby applesauce. Baby applesauce is like something that's totally you don't or let's say or something you put in a blender, right? When you blend something, the thing is totally crushed. Here we're talking about the way Rashi says we have an item that's been crushed. The size has been diminished as a result of the crushing, but it still retains some of the original fruit. It hasn't been crushed. It's still a 95% crushed, let's say. Certain amount crushed. What's the bracha on that crushed fruit? Does it retain the original bracha, or the fact that it's crushed, it's no longer was ground, it's crushed again, but we're saying, but it's not grounded, right? It's crushed, but it's not grounded. It's still not grounded, which would seem from this that if it would have been grounded, then definitely it lost its original, it's no more what it was, and therefore now it would be a shehako. But here we're talking about that it's not grounded, it's crushed. So now, do we look at this fact that it's been crushed a certain amount, that it lost its like? Do we look at it as if it lost its identity of a certain? Even though you can identify, you can see that what it was. But do we say it's no longer the real fruit that you would say the original bracha on, or do we say it still retains the original bracha that you're supposed to make on that? So, and we're gonna. By the way, we're gonna get into maybe we'll touch a little bit about vegetable soup. We'll get to that maybe because we'll connect that a little bit also with that pea soup, right? Pea soup is really a lot of times it's crushed peas. What do you do? There we would say hadama on pea soup, even though the peas are crushed, right? A lot of times you have pea soup. It's like a thick. Usually the babies eat crushed banana. You still see the pieces of banana. It's not like it's not like applesauce that like baby applesauce. See, I would think that there might be a difference between baby applesauce and banana, because unless I have to look at how they make the banana for children, you know what I mean? But meaning the banana in the jars. I haven't seen it in a little while. But
Rabbi,
if we make bananas for the kids, we take a banana, we make it small. It looks like banana, feels like banana, still a banana. The fact that we cut it very small, it still I believe it still has that thickness of a banana. You see what I'm saying, Mr. Haber? But when you blend it, then it's a different story when it's blended. And the applesauce, baby applesauce, all that stuff is like blended. It's fine. It lost its. It's not. You can't even see that it was an apple. If you look at baby applesauce, that yes, but yes, if you see pieces of the fruit, it has a lot to do with it. Correct. Yes, if you see pieces of banana, I see pieces of banana. That would see. Let's say the same thing with potato kugel, like we said. If you see pieces of potato, where they make certain types of potato kugel, you see they ground it very fine, and then sometimes if you see the pieces, then that's how some people will make a distinction. If you see the pieces or you don't see the pieces. Yes, Mike. I'm sorry. Yes, Mike. Mike, Ariel
No,
says
no
hello.
worries. No, sorry.
Ariel, my mom says hello to you.
Hello, hello, Ariel. Hello,
We all
everybody.
say
Good
hello to
morning,
Mike.
Rabbi.
Not only Ariel, but we all say hello to Mike.
Thank you,
Ariel
Rabbi.
doesn't have a
Thank you.
monopoly. Yes.
Thank you, Rabbi. I wanted to ask you when something loses its original texture, like a juice, or I know we know from the wine that because it changed and it upgraded to something else, they changed the bracha. So is it the same for the fruits? Let's say if like the example we're talking about now, is it gonna change the bracha on it
Right.
from a banana to a banana juice, for example?
Right. So it would seem now we have to look at all the different examples, but it would seem that many of the foods, I mean, I can't say I didn't look up in the Sfardi halacha. I could just tell you from the Ashkenazim that if the thing is made in a certain way, right? It's made to be eaten in a certain way. Let's say if I give the example of an apple's made to be eaten as an apple, and it looks like an apple, feels like an apple. If you went ahead and you changed it in a way that now you crushed it, you ground it, you made it into applesauce. And if you still see applesauce, if you still see pieces of the apples, and that's also that addresses Mr. Haber's question. That's a great example, applesauce. If you still see the pieces of the apple, then it's still the apple. If you go ahead and you make applesauce that you ground it in a way that you don't see, and I don't see any pieces of apple here, so then it loses its thing, and therefore it would lose the original bracha and it would turn into a shakol. Correct, Mike? But
Okay,
what but
thank
there
you.
are but a lot of times there are exceptions sometimes in certain cases, and I'm saying one exception would seem to be like pea soup, because it's there as one of the reasons that it's given, because you can't eat the way one of the ways to eat, let's say, a lot of times vegetable soup, a lot of times the way to eat the vegetable soup, is through cooking. If it's made to be eaten in that fashion, so even though you might not see the item, so if it's made, if that's the way it's supposed to be made through cooking, so it will retain, if that's the normal way that it's used in that fashion, so it might retain the bracha. And therefore maybe the vegetable that's made to be used, this is one approach, how some explain why vegetable soup will still be a hadama, and because that's the way it's generally made. It's cooked, you cook the vegetables and you make the soup from it. In contrast to many other things that you don't need apples, you don't need to grind the apples and make it so that you don't need to have to do it in that fashion. You could go ahead and do it without making it so thin. That's one approach. Okay, so that's a different case. Mr. Haber is a different case. Mr. Haber's case is so that I saw there, if a person goes ahead and he cooks and he puts vegetables into water, and then he doesn't eat the vegetables. The vegetables, it's not like the pea. The pea soup, actually the peas disintegrate into the soup. So, but if you go ahead and if you take a vegetable and you're interested not to eat the vegetable itself, just to give it off, just to give a little flavor into the soup itself, that's a different case. And we'll take out the Mishnah Berurah, they discuss these cases. These are cases that are discussed, but that obviously we see a clear difference between that case and the other case. And we have to see how the halacha looks at it. We have to see how. Okay. Now, let's continue in the Gemara.
Rabbi, so what would it be? It would be shakal if you change
Right.
the texture?
If you change the texture and it doesn't look right. That's what it would seem to be a shakol. But I can't tell you that this is how Rabbi Feinstein held. I can't tell you that. I can't tell you what
So
Ravaji
on the
held.
apple
I have to
juice,
look at what other rabbis hold on the matter.
on apple juice and all the juices, we have to do In
All
many
right, all,
juices, it will have to
all,
do
ju-
shakal, most likely.
all, right, all juices shako. The only exception is grape juice is hagefen. And we also said if you're going to have olive oil mixed for some sort of medical issue that you wanted, and you remember we had a whole story with the olive oil, then I don't think you're going to be drinking olive oil in the near future, Mike. I don't think we have to worry about the olive oil, the butter creates on the olive oil. That's the other exception, that olive oil, that the olive oil. But
So if you drink olive oil for health purposes, do you have to do
yeah,
it's
that would be a butter creates. But again, you want to drink it raw. We said you would drink it with some other liquid. Exactly. And also you have to see what the purpose of why you're drinking. If you're mainly drinking it for the olive oil, even if the olive oil will be a minority, right. But if someone's drinking the olive oil, then we have to, exactly, it will be a butter creates. If you're drinking
and
it,
as a medicine, if you're not enjoying it, it's just as a medicine, but it tastes fine. Do you still do the bracha?
that's the good, because we said by the medicine you have to have some sort of benefit, some sort of, you enjoy it. If something doesn't has no taste, if someone takes a medicine that has no taste, they would not say a bracha on it. If its medicine has a taste, so if you have some sort of pleasure, so cough
Got it.
medicine, cough medicine doesn't have a real. It's not. Maybe if they make a cherry something, if they want to make a cherry, they should have it give you a little flavor and you enjoy it. So then maybe they'll make a bracha on it. But if they're doing it just something that's bland that has no taste, you would not say a bracha if you have no enjoyment from it. Um, let's continue in the Gemara. So the Gemara is now talking about this trima. This trima, this fruit, this item that's crushed. So Lohavi Adaiti the Rava my kamale. Rava did not understand what he meant by trima, something that's that's crushed. He didn't understand the question, what he was asking. And then the Gemara continues, and then he'll figure out what the person was asking. So the Gemara continues. 1 second. The Gemara says, Yosef Ravina Kamei de Rava. At the time when the student asked Rava the question, what's the law with Prima? There was another person, there was another student there, another rabbi, but named Ravina. And Ravina asked the person to clarify what he was asking. Clarify your question, right? You're coming to ask a question to the rabbi. What do you mean? You have to give more details. What do you mean? So he says, you meant the shumshimi kamrit? Do you mean if you crush the sesame you're talking about? Are you talking? Sometimes they would crush the sesame seeds to get their oil out. So you're talking about the sesame seed that was crushed? Are you talking about the kurtumi kamrit, the saffron plant? If you went ahead and you crushed it, are you talking about that? Rashi says they would crush the saffron plant, and then after they would crush it, they would mix it with wine to use as a drink. What are you talking about that? Are you talking about once you crush the saffron, is it still the same bracha? Does it retain its original bracha or not? Or the purtzini karmit? Are you talking about grape pits? Let's say crushed grapes. And after you crush the grapes, good morning. Are you talking about what's left after you crush the grapes? Is that your question? Is the bracha still a boyer pre-eights on that or not? Amalei. So Gemara says the hachi aske Rava l'daite. Now Rava understood what the student was asking. He understood that the student is asking, if something is crushed, does it still retain its original bracha or not? It's not grounded. It's crushed a certain amount. It's clearly crushed, but it's not. You could still see the original. You could identify it, see it. It has some of the original left to it. So he says, I understand you're talking about something that's crushed. And I have the answer to your question. What's the answer to your question? I remembered what Rav Asi said. What did Rav Asi say? Rav Asi said that Hai Tamri Shel Truma. If you have dates of Truma, so there's a law by Truma, you have to be careful not to do anything to ruin Truma, right? You can't, there's certain ways you have to treat the fruit of Truma, like we also spoke about, like by Shemitah, the fruit of Shemitah, there's certain laws how you have to treat the fruit. Yeah. So there's a law by Truma that you can't go ahead and take the fruit and ruin the fruit, so to speak. If you ruin the fruit, that's called your ruin because Truma is holy, which is given to the Kohen, has to be eaten, and you have to do something to it that it should remain in that status of eaten. But if you go in and you do something to the Truma and you ruin it, change it in a way that it's no more that food that was once Truma, you ruined it, and you didn't ruin it, you didn't eat it. You did something else. You altered the Truma in a way that could be called you're not allowed to do that. So now the question is this called, if I crush the truma, I crush the product, I crush the date, right? What's the law if I crush the date? So is it still considered the date? Is it still considered truma? Good morning, Yosef at Sadiq. Have a great day, Sammy. Is it still considered truma? Or did it say
Morning, Rabbi.
morning? Or is it considered I did something, I ruined the truma? Is it called that I ruined it? And therefore that's something I can't do to the truma. So the rabbi, so he said, it says that the halacha is I can actually crush the date. Crushing the date, it's not a problem because it's still considered the date. Even though I crushed it a certain amount, it's still considered a date. What do you say? And it's still an eighth. It's still an eighth. It's still, but again, it's not completely grounded. It's not completely, it's still a Baruch Priya eighth. By the way, we see from this, all these Gemara questions, right? Ariel, we once spoke about this, that, the easy way out, Rabbi, why can't we just say a shakol on everything? The answer, and then we could just take this Gemara and say, and go to the next Gemara. The answer is, we have to make sure to say the right bracha. Meaning shahakol is only when we don't know the right bracha, we're stuck. We don't know to say this bracha or that bracha, then we go with the shahakol. But if we able to figure out what the right bracha is, we're supposed to figure out what the right bracha is. I mean, your case, again, there's two types of cases. There's a case, if you can't find out, the question, are you able to find out? You're saying your case, when you're capable of finding out, Mr. Haber is saying, presume in a case when a person's capable of finding out what the bracha is, and he doesn't find out the bracha, maybe he shouldn't eat it. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. You should definitely find out. A person should definitely, meaning this. When do we say you say a shakol? When the Gemara itself has a question. When the halach itself doesn't know what the bracha is. That's what you're saying. But when you're able to, if it's it's only your own deficiency that you don't know, so maybe you shouldn't. You should find out what you should do. You shouldn't just say I'm going to say a shakol because I don't know. You need to go ahead and find out. And that's what we see from the Gemara. The Gemara, we have to find out what the right bracha is. Now, so the Gemara says, so if you went ahead and you had these dates, you can make trima, trima. I could go ahead and crush the date, and it's not a problem because it's still considered a date, even though I crushed it a certain amount. And you see a bird for eight, and therefore it's still, and I did not ruin the truma. Now, however, but you can't make from that sheikha. You can't make beer from these dates because the beer, by making beer, by making beer from the dates, as the dates become, they go down in level, and therefore, and it's considered a problem. You can't do that. You can't use the dates of truma to make beer. but we clearly see, for our purpose, that it's still considered the fruit, even though you crushed it a certain amount, still retains the bracha bar prates, and that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara concludes, "V'hilchata." What's the law? Maya, you have it. The Gemara, "V'hilchata." What's the law? The law is Hamri vavidnu trima. If you have dates and you made trima from the dates, mevachin alayu bore prates. We still say a bore prates on the crushed dates. Why my time? The Messiah kaimi kideme kara. It's still in its original. We look at it like it's in its original form, even though it's been altered a little bit. That it was crushed a certain amount, and it's still a bore pre ha'etz. That's what the Gemara says. Now the Gemara continues. Shetita. What's the law with shetita? So now what? Now we have another question of another. What's shetita? So Rashi says shetita is a food that's made from. Let's say you have these kernels of the wheat, and usually, what do you do with the wheat kernels? You grind it. You make flour, then you mix the water with the flour, and then you bake. That's a normal thing. But what did he do over here? For Rashi, it seems you went ahead and you did not take the kernels of the wheat and grind it in the normal fashion. What you do? You took the wheat and you put it in the oven. You roasted it. You roasted the wheat. And after you roasted the wheat, you went ahead and you made flour from that roasted wheat. You ground it up. And you mix this this ground, and Rashi says, and when you went ahead, Rashi says a food that's made from the flour that was roasted in the oven, and when they roasted in the oven, the stalks was still moist, and it has a certain flavor as a result of that. And now you mix this with other, let's say with oil and some other type of ingredients. And now the question is, what's the bracha to say on the shetita? So the Gemara says, the bracha to say, right, so the question is the bracha of shakol or the bracha is bari minim mizonot? Question is because you did, meaning just like wheat, that normal when we make food, we make a pasta, we make something that contains in it from wheat, we say a mizonot. So is this a mizonot like any other wheat? Or this is not a mizonot like every other wheat? Would it be a shakol? And it's not in its raw stage that you say a bar piyadama. Meaning we learned earlier, if you chew on raw wheat, you make a bar piyadama. Why? Because it's in its original form as a fruit. It came out from the ground, and now you chew on it raw. You make a bar piyadama on raw wheat. If you went ahead now, you changed it because it's not raw, you toasted it, and then you grounded it. So now if you toasted it, I presume it's toasted it. The question is it the normal way to eat it or not? I would have to look up. Meaning, because the reason why we make a mizonot on wheat, when we have a wheat product that's containing wheat, because that's the normal way that it's supposed to be made. And therefore, it's meaning if you take raw wheat, it's not normal to be eaten. It's the fruit, so you make a dama. But it's not but because it could be elevated to a higher level, which is there's an improvement when you grind it and you bake it, it's elevated to the bracha of mezonot. I'm not sure what the status of taking where is roasted wheat in that is it something, is it considered elevated or not elevated? Is it considered, I'm not, we have to see the answer to Mr. Haver's question. So now the Gemara is talking about the shetita. What's the halacha with the shetita, with this roasted kernels, that you roasted the wheat before grinding it, and then you made it into flour, and you mix it with some other ingredients? Is it mizonot? Is it shakol? Did it lose its thing or not? So the Gemara first says, Rav Amar shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Rav says that the bracha is shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Shmuel Amar, and what does Shmuel say? Shmuel says bari minim mizonot. Now, The fact that the rabbis say different brachot, usually it means they're arguing, correct? But comes the next rabbi says, no, it's different cases. They're talking about different cases. Different cases can be different law, and therefore it's not necessarily they're arguing with each other. Because one is talking about one type of texture and one talking about another type of. The Gemara says, "Below pligi, ha, that which Shmuel says about Mizonot is ba'ava, that you made it with a lot. The shtita, when you made it with a lot of flour. If you made it with a lot of flour, that would be considered a you would say aborim minei mizonot. Why? Because when it's made with a lot of flour, then it's made for food purposes. You're going to eat this as a food, as a normal food. So normal food that came from wheat, that was roasted, you baked it through roasting, right? So therefore you would go ahead and you made it to flour, you would say aborim minei mizonot. But if it has a small amount of flour, so now the question is, so what, Rabbi? We all know if you have a minority ingredient of flour, we said it's still the bracha would be in bar minei mizonot. But that's if the flour went in for the purpose of food purposes. But if the flour comes in not for food purpose, but for the purpose of refuah, for health purposes, it's for medication purposes, not for eating. So therefore, but you do get some benefit, you do get some enjoyment out of it. So therefore, you'll say a shahakol. But you're not going to go ahead and say a borim minei mizonot because it's not in the fashion that it's eaten as the normal food. So that's what it's not made as food. It's made for medical purposes. That's what the Gemara says. Ha beraka, when it's very thick because you put a lot of flour and you mixed it with honey. Most probably, I think they say, how did you make the shetita? How did you make this shetita? I think I saw somewhere it has some, what some of the other ingredients in the shetita, maybe like it has some flour, some oil, some other things. If it was very thick because you put a lot of flour in, then the bracha is mizonot. But when you didn't put so much flour in, then the bracha is a shakol near bidvaro. So they say that the shetita is a dish from flour with toasted. It's mixed with oil, water, and salt. That's how they make. So those are the other ingredients of the shetita. So if you didn't put too much flour in, because then you're using it rakal aval achila avdilei and rakal refu avdilei. The Gemara says that the ava, the thick one, was made for eating purposes, and therefore you make a bar mitzvah. But the soft one, when you made it very soft, because you were interested for health purposes, for refuah, and therefore since it's not in the way, it's not for eating purposes, and therefore it really wasn't elevated to a higher level because it's not made for eating purposes. So therefore, but it's still not in the original wheat form. So therefore, it's not adama, it's not a mezonot. So therefore, it's a shakol. So that's what the Gemara says. You make on this shetita, if it's for medical purposes, you'll make a shakol. Now, massive, and the way the Ra'ah explains, anything that's only made for medical purposes, and a person you will not make it that way when you don't want to eat it for refuah. But if you're only eating, the only time you will eat it this way is only for medical purposes, a shakol. But if you would have an item that, the doctor says you have to eat this for medical purposes, but people, no bracha if you have no benefit, if you have no enjoyment. But let's say the doctor says you have to have this type of vegetable. The doctor says it's very healthy. You got to eat a lot of greens. And I only use I'm eating the greens for medical purposes. I want to eat the greens without. I never eat greens, right? But the fact is, since it's normal, people eat this food for non-medical purposes, and the bracha we had daman the greens. So now the fact that you're eating it for medical purposes doesn't change the bracha. It'll still be a bracha daman, right? If you have vegetables, and the doctor says you got to eat vegetables, you're eating it for medical purposes, but people eat it not for medical purposes. Therefore, of course, the bracha is adama. We're talking about an item that's only made this way for medical, and no one eats it unless It's for medical purposes. Therefore, the bracha would be a shako. Now the Gemara says, Masiv Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef is going to challenge. So we'll see tomorrow more about Rav Yosef's question that he's going to ask from the Breita. If you want, we could, we'll see tomorrow more about this. I want to wish everyone a great day. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody. What'd you say? Yosef Atzadik is here. Yes, he just left.
Oh, we don't.
And so you got to tell him.